It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, yet the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Reporters, lawyers, and onlookers filled every seat, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. The room hummed with whispers as the judge prepared to announce the verdict. No one could have predicted what would happen next, certainly not the judge, not even the press. And most definitely not Elon Musk, the man who had seemingly weathered every storm, no matter how fierce. The case had begun innocuously enough. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur behind Tesla and SpaceX, had been accused of violating a series of environmental regulations related to his various businesses. The accusation? That his companies were harming the environment with unsustainable energy practices. The fine, a staggering $50 million, was meant to send a message to him and others in the tech industry: no one was above the law, no matter how powerful or influential they were. But this was Elon Musk. A man who had gone to space, revolutionized electric cars, and practically bent the rules of the universe to suit his ambitions. And so, as the judge announced the fine, the atmosphere in the room shifted. No one could ignore the feeling that something bigger was brewing. Mr. Musk, the judge's voice broke through the murmurs. I am imposing a fine of $50 million for your company's violations of the environmental regulations. This is to send a clear message that the law applies to everyone. No exceptions. No matter how successful, or wealthy. Elon stood up, his face a perfect mask of calm, as if he had been expecting this all along. His legal team, sitting behind him, exchanged worried glances. They had hoped the fine would be reduced, or maybe even dismissed entirely. But this? This was a blow they hadn't prepared for. You can't be serious, one of Musk's attorneys whispered under his breath, though he knew the answer. Elon was used to fighting for every inch he could get, this was just another battle. But what happened next made everyone in the room pause. With a slight tilt of his head, Musk looked directly at the judge. The courtroom fell silent. It wasn't the look of a man who had just been handed a monumental fine. It was the look of someone who had just seen the board and knew exactly where the game was headed. Your Honor, Musk's voice rang out, smooth but piercing, I believe there's been a misunderstanding here. The judge frowned, adjusting his glasses as if unsure whether he'd heard correctly. Mr. Musk, this is not a debate. The fine has been issued, and I've made my ruling. We can discuss any appeals later. You're free to go, but the fine is non-negotiable. Elon smiled slightly, a glint of something almost mischievous in his eyes. I'm not here to debate the fine, Your Honor. I'm here to let you know that I intend to make sure this fine never reaches your bank account. The room went dead silent. The reporters, who had been typing furiously on their laptops, stopped. The judge blinked, taken aback. No one had ever spoken like that in his courtroom. No one had ever dared to question his authority so blatantly. You're threatening me? The judge asked, his voice dropping dangerously low. No, Musk replied calmly. I'm just saying that this fine, it's going to be an issue. And I'm very good at solving issues. The judge's brow furrowed, clearly annoyed. You're treading on dangerous ground, Mr. Musk. Don't mistake my leniency for weakness. I will not tolerate insubordination. Musk stood there for a moment, his expression unreadable. His eyes never left the judge, as if they were having a private conversation that no one else in the room could understand. He could feel the tension building, the energy of the room growing thicker. He was always a step ahead, always thinking 5 moves ahead, and he knew exactly what would happen next. Very well, Your Honor, Elon said, turning his attention to the room. I'll see you all in a few days, then. It seems there's a bigger picture to this case than I initially thought. And just like that, he turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind a stunned silence. The reporters exploded into action, their voices rising in excitement. Social media buzzed with speculation and rumors. Did he just threaten the judge? What is Musk planning? Is he above the law? These were just a few of the many questions racing through the minds of those who had witnessed the event. But Musk's departure wasn't the only thing that had left people scratching their heads. It was the way he'd said it, calmly, confidently, and with a sense of finality. It was as if he had already won, even though the battle was far from over. Back in his car, on the way to his private jet, Elon stared out the window at the city passing by. He wasn't worried. Not one bit. In fact, a small smile tugged at his lips. He had been in sticky situations before, but he always found a way out. This time would be no different. His mind raced as he thought about the next steps. The fine was just the beginning. The real game was much bigger than that. This was about something far more important, something that had been brewing for years, just waiting for the right moment to surface. Elon Musk had a plan. And in his world, nothing ever went according to plan without a few surprises. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk's story had always been one of ambition, rebellion, and unrelenting perseverance. But long before he became the infamous tech mogul that the world knew today, he was just a boy with big dreams. And those dreams had always seemed too big for anyone to understand. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971, Elon was the son of a Canadian mother, May Musk, a dietitian and model, and a South African father, Errol Musk, an electromechanical engineer. From a young age, Elon was different. While other children spent their afternoons playing games or watching TV, he immersed himself in books, often reading for hours on end. It was in these pages that his obsession with technology and innovation took root. Science fiction novels, especially the works of Isaac Asimov and Douglas Adams, shaped his worldview. They presented a universe full of infinite possibilities, a universe that Elon Musk knew he would one day be a part of. His father was a brilliant engineer, but also a deeply troubled man, with a volatile temper and an ego that clashed with Elon's growing sense of independence. Despite this strained relationship, Elon inherited his father's intelligence and drive. It was his mother, however, who offered the emotional support that grounded him. May was a resilient woman, always encouraging her children to follow their passions, no matter how unconventional they might seem. As a teenager, Elon was relentlessly bullied. His shy, intellectual nature made him an easy target. But this hardship would only serve to fuel his ambition. In a way, the bullying hardened him. It gave him the drive to prove everyone wrong, to rise above the limitations that others tried to place on him. He became a master of escape, not through physical means, but through his mind. He found solace in technology, spending his free time tinkering with computers and programming. By the age of 12, he had already developed a video game, Blaster, which he sold for $500. It was a small victory, but it was a sign of the extraordinary things that were to come. At 17, Elon left South Africa for Canada, seeking to avoid the mandatory military service that was required in his homeland. He enrolled at Queen's University in Ontario before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania 2 years later. It was here that his journey as a business mogul began to take shape. At Penn, he earned degrees in both economics and physics, which would later serve as the foundation for his ventures into the tech world. But his ambitions were never confined to the classroom. Elon wanted to change the world. And he believed that technology was the key to doing so. His first taste of the tech world came when he dropped out of Stanford University just 2 days into his PhD program. Stanford, he realized, was too slow for his fast-moving dreams. The internet boom was just beginning, and Elon saw an opportunity. Along with his brother Kimball, he co-founded Zip2, a company that provided online city guides for newspapers. Within a few years, they sold the company to Compaq for nearly $300 million, giving Elon his first big payday. But instead of resting on his laurels, Elon's ambitions only grew. He used his newfound wealth to fund X.com, an online payment company that would eventually become PayPal. When PayPal was bought by eBay in 2002 for $1.5 billion, Elon Musk was already a household name. But while others might have been content with their wealth and success, Elon had his sights set on something much bigger: space exploration, sustainable energy, and changing the way the world thought about technology. In 2002, Elon founded SpaceX with the goal of reducing space transportation costs and making space exploration more accessible. It was a bold move, but for Elon, it was just another step toward his ultimate goal: making humanity a multiplanetary species. Along the way, he founded Tesla in 2003, revolutionizing the electric car industry, and later Solar City, which would become a key player in the solar energy market. Musk wasn't just thinking about today, he was thinking about the future. Yet, despite his accomplishments, Musk had never been a man to shy away from controversy. His unorthodox approach to business, his penchant for making bold statements, and his tendency to challenge the status quo often rubbed people the wrong way. The media loved to criticize him, and his detractors were never far behind. But Elon never seemed to care. He had a vision, and nothing, no amount of criticism, no amount of negativity, could ever shake his resolve. It wasn't just his business acumen that made him a target. His personality and his approach to life made him a lightning rod for both admiration and disdain. He was brilliant, yes, but he was also unconventional and unpredictable. He didn't play by the rules, and he didn't want to. His motto seemed to be simple: if you want to change the world, you have to break a few things along the way. And this, perhaps more than anything, was what made Elon Musk both loved and hated by the world. But there was something deeper at play. Beneath the confident, sometimes abrasive exterior, Elon Musk was driven by something more than just a desire for wealth or fame. He believed, truly believed, that the human race could do better. That we could be better. That we could push the boundaries of science and technology to solve the world's most pressing problems: climate change, energy consumption, space exploration, and build a future for humanity that was sustainable, ambitious, and truly extraordinary. In those early years, before he became the icon he is today, there were moments when Elon Musk doubted himself. Times when his ventures seemed on the brink of failure, when investors pulled out, when rockets exploded, when his companies teetered on the edge of collapse. But even in those moments, when others would have given up, Musk kept going. He took risks that no one else would take. He made decisions that seemed insane to anyone watching from the outside. And every time, he came out the other side stronger, more determined, and more focused on the mission at hand. His critics would say that he was reckless, that he was too arrogant, that his ego would be his undoing. But those who really understood Musk saw him for what he truly was: a visionary, a man who would do anything to see his dreams come to life. He wasn't just changing industries or making money. He was changing the world. And now, as he stood in that courtroom, facing a fine that many would have seen as a setback, Elon Musk was thinking bigger than ever. The court, the fine, the judge, they were nothing compared to the challenges that lay ahead. In his mind, this was just another obstacle to overcome. Another challenge to outsmart. Because, in the end, no one outsmarts Elon Musk. The next few days after Elon Musk's courtroom encounter were filled with frenzy. The media buzzed with stories, opinions, and debates. Was Musk truly above the law? Had he just dismissed the authority of the judiciary system with a snap of his fingers? Questions swirled like a storm, but none of them seemed to faze Musk. As usual, he appeared calm, unfazed, almost enjoying the chaos that his presence ignited. Meanwhile, inside the corridors of power, the reverberations of Musk's defiance were louder than ever. The courtroom incident had set off a chain reaction. Powerful figures, from politicians to corporate executives, were now involved in a game that extended far beyond environmental regulations. This wasn't just about a fine anymore, this was about asserting dominance, about testing the boundaries of authority. Back in the courtroom, Judge Jonathan Rivers, the man who had presided over the hearing, sat in his chambers, still processing the encounter. He had been a judge for over 2 decades, known for his firm rulings and unshakable authority. He had never encountered anyone like Elon Musk before. The fine wasn't just a legal matter, it was personal. Musk's audacity had rattled him. No one had ever dared to undermine him so publicly. The judge prided himself on making decisions that carried weight, decisions that forced respect. And Musk, by waltzing out of the courtroom with such nonchalance, had turned that very authority into a joke. It wasn't just about the money, it was a test of power. "I'll make him regret that," Judge Rivers muttered to himself, his mind already racing with plans for retaliation. There would be no more leniency. He would make sure the world saw that no one, no matter how rich or famous, was immune from the law. But Musk wasn't backing down either. Behind closed doors, he convened with his closest allies, his team of legal experts, business advisors, and, of course, the trusted people in his inner circle. They were already devising their strategy, one that would not only render the fine irrelevant but would shift the entire narrative in Musk's favor. Musk had always been one step ahead, and this time was no different. "Elon, you know this is going to get ugly," his legal advisor, Tara, said with concern as they sat in his office. "The judge is furious. He's already hinting at more severe actions. He's going to do whatever it takes to make an example out of you." Musk leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk on his lips. He wasn't concerned. It wasn't about winning or losing this case, it was about control. In a world full of bureaucracy and regulation, Musk had mastered the art of bending systems to his will. "I've been through worse," he said, his voice steady and confident. "Let him do what he wants. This is bigger than any fine, any court. They'll try to go after me, but they're not prepared for what's coming." Tara raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?" Elon's eyes gleamed with the unmistakable spark of determination. "They think they've got me in a corner. But they don't know what I've built. Not just in terms of companies, but the influence, the partnerships, the entire ecosystem I've created. It's time to turn the tables." His words echoed in the room. Elon Musk had long been a master of turning challenges into opportunities, finding the leverage no one else could see. His entire career had been built on innovation, on disrupting industries that were otherwise stagnant. But now, his focus wasn't on technology or space exploration. It was on a different kind of game, one that involved power, perception, and influence. The media firestorm surrounding Musk's courtroom stunt continued to grow. Headlines screamed about his defiance, about the man who thinks he's above the law. Musk, however, remained a step ahead. He issued a statement to the press, one that was calculated, poised, and yet subtly provocative. "I believe the world needs to stop viewing issues through a narrow lens of rules and limitations," the statement read. "The real question isn't whether I'll pay this fine. The real question is why the system punishes the very innovation that drives progress. We need a system that rewards bold ideas, not stifles them. The future depends on that." The media ate it up. Musk's words painted him as a misunderstood visionary, someone who was willing to challenge the status quo for the greater good. Critics couldn't ignore the fact that Musk had a point. His companies, Tesla, SpaceX, SolarCity, had undeniably pushed the world toward a more sustainable future. His ideas, although often radical, had changed the game in industries that had been stagnant for decades. Yet, for every supporter Musk gained, there were even more who saw him as a threat, an arrogant billionaire who believed he was untouchable. The online debate raged on. Supporters hailed him as a hero of innovation, while detractors criticized his disregard for the law and his tendency to manipulate public opinion. And behind the scenes, the judge wasn't the only one who was plotting Musk's downfall. The U.S. government had already begun discussing potential sanctions against Musk's companies. Senators were beginning to rally against him, branding him as the face of corporate greed and environmental neglect. But no one had quite anticipated how Musk would respond. They had underestimated him once again. Musk's next move was a carefully orchestrated response that would further escalate the situation and send a clear message. He gathered his closest advisors, and together, they mapped out a plan. It was time for Musk to reveal something that no one had expected, a new initiative that would not only shift the narrative but force his critics to rethink their entire approach. He wasn't just going to fight back with words, he was going to show the world that his vision for the future was one that everyone needed to embrace, whether they liked him or not. "We're launching something that will make them all take a step back," Musk declared, his voice filled with quiet intensity. "This will change everything." It was a gamble, but it was exactly what Elon Musk did best: take risks and turn them into triumphs. Whether this plan would succeed or backfire remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the rising conflict between Elon Musk and the system was far from over. And this was only the beginning. The weeks following Elon Musk's courtroom standoff passed in a blur of tension and anticipation. The media frenzy had reached fever pitch, and the world watched as Musk navigated through a storm of controversy. But beneath the public spectacle, a different kind of war was taking place, a war of innovation, strategy, and power. Elon Musk had always been a man of action, not words. And as the political pressure mounted and the legal challenges grew, he knew that the time had come to step up his game. It wasn't just about winning a court case anymore, it was about showing the world the true scope of his vision. The plan he had in mind was a bold one, a gamble that would place all of his cards on the table. And, as always, Musk was willing to risk everything for the sake of progress. "Elon, are you sure about this?" Tara asked, standing by the large conference table in SpaceX's headquarters. The sleek, modern room was filled with top executives and advisors, all listening intently as Musk laid out his plan. "This will take everything we've got. If it fails..." "It won't fail," Elon interrupted, his voice firm and resolute. "We're going to shift the narrative. We're going to do something no one's ever done before. And when we do, the world will be watching us, not them." The idea was simple, yet profoundly audacious. Musk had decided to launch a new global initiative, one that would not only highlight the work he was already doing in clean energy, space exploration, and sustainable transportation, but also force his critics to see him in a new light. He had been planning it for months, quietly assembling a team of the best minds in the world to tackle a project so ambitious that it would become the benchmark for future generations. The initiative was called Project Genesis, an ambitious plan to build the world's first fully sustainable city on Mars, powered entirely by solar energy, and designed with cutting-edge technology from his companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and SolarCity. It would be a living, breathing proof of what humanity could accomplish when technology and innovation were aligned with the future of the planet. And the first step would be the construction of the world's most advanced, self-sustaining spaceport, a base on Mars capable of facilitating colonization. "Elon, you're talking about sending humans to Mars," one of the senior engineers, David, said, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "This isn't just a next step in space exploration. This is an entirely new frontier." Elon nodded, his eyes glinting with determination. "Exactly. If we don't push the boundaries now, we'll be stuck on Earth, watching our planet deteriorate. Mars is the future. We can't just talk about it anymore, we need to act." But the journey to make Project Genesis a reality wouldn't be easy. Musk knew that the media storm over his courtroom defiance wasn't going to subside. There were still critics in high places, politicians pushing their own agendas, and, of course, Judge Rivers, who was determined to make sure Musk paid for his perceived arrogance. Yet, in Musk's mind, these obstacles weren't problems, they were just the next challenges to overcome. His ability to turn adversity into opportunity had always been his greatest strength. And now, he would use the court case as a springboard for a much larger mission. "Start with the spaceport," Musk instructed his team. "Get everything ready. We'll launch a test mission by the end of the year. And in the meantime, we'll announce Project Genesis to the world." The project's announcement was scheduled to coincide with a high-profile SpaceX launch, an ambitious mission to send a crewed spaceship to Mars as part of an initial exploratory mission. If successful, it would mark the first time in history that humans would set foot on another planet. The world's attention would be squarely on Musk's efforts, and he knew that the moment was perfect. It would be the ultimate counterattack to the critics and the politicians who sought to undermine him. In the meantime, the lawsuit and the court proceedings regarding the environmental fine were still ongoing, but Musk remained unfazed. His legal team continued to fight the case in the background, while he and his team focused on the larger picture. Musk had long since learned to compartmentalize. While the media and the legal system were bogged down in petty disputes, he was thinking about humanity's future. And as the days passed, something remarkable happened. The public began to shift. While the media continued to cover the ongoing legal drama, the buzz surrounding Project Genesis began to grow louder. People started talking about it, not as some far-off dream, but as a tangible, achievable future. Musk's vision for a sustainable Mars colony was no longer just a possibility, it was an inevitability. It was the kind of bold idea that captivated the imagination. No longer was Elon Musk simply the CEO of a few successful tech companies, he was becoming the face of humanity's future. He was the person who dared to challenge not only earthly limitations but the very limits of human potential. As the preparations for the mission ramped up, Musk's relationship with his team began to grow even more intense. There were sleepless nights, heated debates, and long hours spent perfecting every detail. But through it all, Musk was the constant force that drove the project forward. He was the one who never faltered, never lost faith in the vision, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. On the night before the final test flight to Mars, Musk stood on the balcony of his private residence, staring out at the stars. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought about the road that had led him here, the countless risks, the failures, the breakthroughs. He had always known that it was never going to be easy, but he had never imagined it would be this hard. Yet, as he looked up at the sky, Musk's resolve only grew stronger. The journey ahead was full of uncertainty, but it was also full of promise. There was no turning back now. The mission to Mars was bigger than any fine, bigger than any courtroom drama. This was about the future of humanity. Tomorrow, the world would see what Musk was truly capable of. And nothing, not even the system that sought to tear him down, could stop him now. The day of the Mars mission arrived, and with it, a heavy sense of anticipation. The eyes of the world were upon Elon Musk and SpaceX, waiting to see if the grand vision of Project Genesis would unfold before them, or if it would collapse under the weight of the countless challenges it had faced. Musk knew that this was the moment, everything he had worked for, every risk he had taken, and every sacrifice made by his team was about to be tested in a way that no one could have predicted. The rocket, which had been months in the making, stood tall on the launch pad. The sleek, silver frame gleamed under the bright lights of the early morning, while the buzz of technicians and engineers filled the air. Musk stood in front of the control center, his eyes fixed on the massive countdown clock ticking down to 0. His thoughts raced, but his exterior remained calm, too calm. This was his moment, but also a test of everything that had come before. He had always believed in the idea that failure wasn't the end, it was just a step toward success. But today, failure felt like an unbearable weight he couldn't shake off. If this mission failed, Project Genesis would fall apart before it even started. The vision of Mars as a sustainable, human-made world would turn into an insurmountable dream. "Elon, everything looks good on our end," said Tara, who was standing beside him. Her voice was a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She knew how much was riding on this moment, and she could see the weariness in Elon's eyes. For weeks, he had been laser-focused on the mission, barely sleeping, constantly refining every detail of the plan. It was as if, in his mind, the entire world was at stake. Musk nodded, though he didn't feel the certainty he once had. He glanced over at the engineers, who were nervously adjusting screens and data on their consoles. Each one of them knew what this mission meant. If this was a success, Musk would cement his legacy. But if it failed, there would be no second chances. The countdown reached its final minutes, and Musk's pulse quickened. Despite his outer composure, his heart raced. The air in the control room was thick with anticipation, the tension almost tangible. People huddled around their monitors, eyes glued to the screen, waiting for the rocket to lift off. As the final seconds ticked away, Elon took a deep breath and spoke, his voice steady but with an unmistakable edge of determination. "We've worked too hard to let this slip away. Let's make history," he said, his words carrying the weight of every challenge he had ever faced. With that, the countdown reached 0. The ignition sequence began, and the engines of the rocket roared to life, sending a pulse of power through the ground. The flames erupted from the base of the rocket, and with a thunderous blast, the spacecraft lifted off, soaring into the atmosphere. For a moment, the world held its breath. The rocket climbed higher and higher, breaking through the clouds and disappearing into the vastness of the sky. It was a perfect launch. "Success," Tara whispered under her breath, her eyes fixed on the screens. The room erupted into applause, and Elon Musk allowed himself a rare, satisfied smile. But even as the mission's success unfolded, the emotional weight of the journey hit him like a wave. The battle he had fought with the legal system, the relentless pressure from critics, and the expectations of millions of people, it all began to crystallize. Musk had spent so many years relentlessly pushing forward, but today was a reminder of just how much he had sacrificed for this moment. As the rocket neared its designated orbit, Musk was briefed on the next stage: the spacecraft would detach and begin its course toward Mars. This was where the real test lay: would it successfully land on the red planet and establish the first human foothold on its surface? The mission team went into high alert, monitoring the spacecraft's trajectory with precision. Elon's attention never wavered, but his mind raced as he thought about the countless obstacles he had overcome to reach this point. The courtroom battles, the public scrutiny, the challenges within his own companies, all of it led up to this. He had faced adversity at every turn, and every time, he had come out on top. But now, on the brink of success, Musk realized that the journey had been about more than just the destination. It had been about the pursuit of something greater than himself. Finally, the moment arrived. The spacecraft, in a flawless maneuver, touched down on the Martian surface. The control room exploded into jubilation, but for Elon, it was almost surreal. He stood there, breathing deeply, allowing the moment to sink in. The first human-made object had landed on Mars. And it was just the beginning. The world reacted as expected: waves of praise, admiration, and awe flooded social media, the news outlets, and public forums. Musk had done it. He had achieved what was once thought to be impossible. But even as the accolades poured in, there was something deeper that tugged at Musk's heart. He wasn't doing this for the praise. He wasn't doing this for the recognition. He was doing it for the future. And yet, as the triumph unfolded, Musk's mind flashed to the battle he had yet to finish, the legal battle that was still raging in the courts. Judge Rivers was out there, still determined to make him pay. The fine wasn't just a matter of money anymore, it was a symbol of defiance. Musk's success in space wouldn't mean anything if the judicial system continued to attack him. As the celebration continued, Musk's gaze fell to the corner of the room where his legal team was gathered, waiting for him. He knew what was coming next. "I'll handle the next step," he told them. "But right now, let's focus on Mars." And in that moment, Elon Musk allowed himself a brief, fleeting sense of peace. He had just made history. But in the back of his mind, the fight was far from over. He had won a victory for humanity, but the battle for his place in the world had only just begun. The euphoric celebration that followed the successful Mars mission was short-lived. The excitement of landing a spacecraft on another planet was undeniable, but Elon Musk knew that it was only a small victory in a much larger war. The next day, while the world reveled in SpaceX's triumph, Musk found himself back in the trenches, not with rockets and space stations, but with legal papers and court hearings. Judge Rivers was still waiting, his gavel raised in anticipation, ready to impose a heavy fine on Musk's ventures. Despite the monumental achievement of sending humans to Mars, the legal battle over the environmental fine persisted. Musk had expected this. He understood the nature of public perception. The court of law was rarely moved by acts of space exploration or grand ambitions. The legal system operated in its own realm, indifferent to the cosmic scale of his goals. That afternoon, Elon stood in front of his legal team, preparing for the next phase of the courtroom drama. He had learned to compartmentalize, but today was different. There was a lingering weight in his chest, a feeling that he hadn't felt in a long time, a need to put things into perspective. "All right, here's the deal," Musk said, his voice calm but edged with the resolve he had carried through the years. "We're going to win this. But it's not just about the fine. It's about proving that innovation should never be held back by outdated rules and regulations. We can't let the future of humanity be shackled by a few people who can't see the bigger picture." Tara, who had been with him since the beginning of the SpaceX journey, nodded. She had seen him take on the impossible before. But this felt different. The stakes were higher, and the pressure was building. "Elon, I know you're right," Tara said, her voice tight with frustration. "But there's something bigger at play here. The media, the critics, they won't let you off the hook. They'll twist this story to fit their narrative. What you need to do is change the game. Let's show them how we can do better." Musk leaned back in his chair, considering her words. It wasn't just about winning the lawsuit anymore, it was about making a statement to the world. "I know what you mean," he said, his voice reflective. "We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the future of the planet, and for humanity's right to evolve. And that's something bigger than any fine or lawsuit." As the legal battle loomed, the media circus surrounding Musk continued to escalate. He had learned to deal with the public scrutiny, but now, with his newfound status as the man who put humanity on Mars, the spotlight was even more intense. The critics were louder than ever, questioning not only his methods but his very character. Yet, amidst the frenzy, Elon Musk found a moment of quiet. Standing on the rooftop of his private residence, gazing out at the sprawling city below, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The road to this point had been anything but easy. From the early days of Tesla, struggling to get investors to take him seriously, to the relentless battles with the powers that be over SpaceX's funding, to the courtroom drama that had now come to define his reputation, Musk had always been the underdog. But the thing about underdogs was that they didn't play by the rules. They made their own path. And that was exactly what Musk had done. He thought back to his earliest days, when he had been a dreamer, obsessed with space, innovation, and the idea that humanity could do better. Those ideas had been dismissed as impossible, as pipe dreams. Yet here he was, standing at the helm of a revolution. He wasn't just talking about change, he was making it happen. The problem was that no one had expected the revolution to come with so much opposition. And no one had anticipated that Musk would be both the hero and the villain in this unfolding narrative. The law, the media, and the public, they all had their own agendas, their own biases. Musk understood this more than anyone. But he also knew that he couldn't stop. Stopping meant conceding defeat. And for Musk, there was no room for defeat. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from his legal team. "Judge Rivers wants a meeting tomorrow. The fine is still on the table. Prepare for battle." Elon sighed but smiled slightly. This battle was far from over. But this time, he had the upper hand. Mars had changed the narrative. The world's eyes were on him, and they had seen what he could do. Now, it was time to turn that power into something unstoppable. The following day, Musk found himself in the courtroom again, facing the same Judge Rivers who had been so adamant about holding him accountable for the environmental violations. The courtroom was filled with the usual suspects, lawyers, journalists, and a few spectators, all eager to witness the next chapter in this high-stakes drama. Musk's legal team was present, as was Tara, who had been by his side through every phase of the mission. Judge Rivers entered the room, and the tension was palpable. He looked at Musk with a mixture of disdain and curiosity, as though waiting for the billionaire to somehow surprise him again. But this time, Musk wasn't there to argue his innocence. He wasn't there to grovel or apologize. Instead, he was there to lay down the future, a future where regulations and red tape no longer held back the potential of humanity. The courtroom fell silent as Musk stepped forward, his gaze never wavering from Judge Rivers. He cleared his throat and began, his voice calm but unwavering. "Your Honor, I've been in this fight for a long time. I've faced challenges, I've made mistakes, and I've paid my dues. But I am here today to tell you something that the world needs to hear. We are on the verge of something unprecedented. We've already set foot on Mars. And we're not stopping there. This fine. It's a relic of the past. A relic that no longer serves the future of humanity. We need to move forward, not backwards. The world is watching. And I'll be damned if I let this country's legal system prevent the next step in human evolution." There was a long pause. For a moment, Musk wondered if the courtroom would erupt in backlash. But then, something unexpected happened. Judge Rivers, who had spent weeks casting doubt on Musk's plans, seemed to hesitate. His eyes narrowed, as if considering Musk's words. "Mr. Musk," he said slowly, "you're asking for more than just a dismissal of this fine. You're asking for a change in the way we approach innovation, in the way we regulate it." "That's exactly what I'm asking for," Musk replied, his voice steady. "And I won't stop until we get it." There was silence. For the first time in this entire legal ordeal, Musk felt like he had made the impact he'd been striving for. This wasn't just about him. It was about shifting the very nature of how humanity thought about progress, about the future. It was about pushing the boundaries that had long held them back. Judge Rivers sat back in his chair, deep in thought. The battle for the fine was far from over, but in that moment, Elon Musk knew one thing for certain: no matter the outcome, he had won the war. Elon Musk sat in his private office, the sleek glass walls of SpaceX's headquarters offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. The early morning sun bathed the room in light, but even that couldn't lift the weight that had settled on his shoulders in the past week. The legal battle with Judge Rivers was far from over, and though he had made a powerful statement, the road ahead seemed more uncertain than ever. The fine was still looming, a constant reminder that even in the age of innovation, there were forces trying to keep things in check. The media had picked up on the courtroom drama, twisting and turning Musk's words to fit their narrative. Some hailed him as the future of humanity, the modern-day Prometheus who would deliver the gift of Mars to mankind. Others, especially environmental activists and some government officials, painted him as a reckless billionaire who cared more about his ego than the health of the planet. But the most frustrating part for Musk was the constant scrutiny. The critics who had spent years calling him delusional were now using the same media platforms to question his every move. They weren't focused on Mars, or the advances SpaceX had made in reusable rockets, or the fact that humanity had taken its first step onto another world. They were fixated on the fine, on a mistake he'd made years ago. And it made him feel, for the first time in years, like he was losing control. Tara sat across from him, her eyes sharp and focused as always, but even she could see the strain that had begun to wear on Musk. She wasn't used to seeing him so visibly affected by something, but the weight of it all had become undeniable. "Elon, I know this has been tough, but don't let them get in your head. We've faced tougher challenges," Tara said, her voice calm but firm. "You've revolutionized space travel. You've made history. The critics are just noise." Musk ran his fingers through his hair and sighed. "I know. But it's not just about the fine. It's about the principle of it. Every time they put a roadblock in front of us, it's not just about the law or the environment, it's about the future. The future of humanity." Tara nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "But you've already proven that you're not backing down. You've shown the world what you can do. And that's something no one can take away from you. The question now is, what's the next step? What's your move?" Musk leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with determination. The question was a good one. What was the next step? The Mars mission had been a monumental success, but he needed more. More than just success, it was about changing the trajectory of humanity's future. And for that, he needed to go beyond just space. He needed to make sure that the very foundations of human progress were not stifled by outdated systems. "I've been thinking a lot about that," Musk said. "We can't just fight the fine. We have to take it further. We need a movement. A rallying cry for the next generation of innovators. I'm tired of playing defense. It's time to go on offense." Tara looked intrigued. "A movement? What do you mean?" Musk's eyes glinted with the same spark of innovation that had defined his entire career. "It's time we changed the rules of the game. Space is just the beginning. I want to reshape how the world thinks about innovation. We're going to make this about more than just me. We're going to make it about the future of humanity, the right to explore, to innovate, to break barriers. And we're going to take that message global." He stood up, his energy shifting as if a light had turned on in his mind. "We're going to create a global platform for innovation. A place where the brightest minds from all corners of the world can come together and collaborate without the constraints of bureaucracy and red tape. A place where the future is not held back by the failures of the past. And we're going to do it by bringing people together, engineers, scientists, visionaries. If they can work together, the impossible becomes possible." Tara's face brightened as she saw where he was going with this. A global platform for innovation. You're talking about something that would change the entire game. A place where the visionaries can thrive, where resources are shared, and where the rules aren't just about protecting the old world, but pushing the boundaries of the new one. "Exactly," Musk said, his voice filled with passion. "The Mars mission was just the first step. But I want humanity to reach further, to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. I want the world to see that innovation is not something that's going to wait for permission. It's something that's going to be driven by the people who refuse to be held back." Tara nodded slowly, the idea starting to take shape in her mind. "But how do we get there? How do we convince the world to join us? The media, the lawmakers, they won't be easy to convince." "We don't need their permission," Musk replied with a grin. "We need the people. We need the innovators, the dreamers, the risk-takers. The world is full of them, but they're held back by rules that don't make sense. It's time we show them that they have a voice. That they can make a difference." Musk's eyes sparkled with excitement as he walked toward the window, gazing out at the city below. "We're going to start a movement. And we're going to do it by making the impossible possible. Mars was just the beginning. Now, it's time to take the next step, together." The news broke within hours. Musk's plan was bold, audacious, and entirely in line with the kind of disruption he was known for. He had announced the creation of a new initiative, a global platform for collaboration and innovation, with a focus on space, technology, and environmental sustainability. It wasn't just a business venture, it was a call to action. Musk was calling on engineers, scientists, and thinkers to join him in a new kind of revolution. The response was immediate. Some were skeptical, of course. They questioned Musk's motives and whether this new platform could really change the world. Others, however, saw the potential of what he was proposing, a chance to break free from the chains of bureaucracy and start fresh with a vision for the future. And as Musk prepared for the next phase of his plan, he couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism that he hadn't felt in years. The critics would always be there, but this time, he wasn't fighting alone. This time, he had the entire world on his side. The idea had been set in motion, but it wasn't enough to just speak about a revolution. Elon Musk knew that if he was going to change the world, he needed more than just words, he needed action. He needed to rally the right people, those who were not only capable of thinking differently but who had the courage to follow through on those thoughts. The platform he envisioned wasn't just a tech hub, it had to be a global movement, a crucible of new ideas, experimentation, and collaboration. It was time to begin the process of gathering the brightest minds from every corner of the world. Within days of announcing the initiative, the response was overwhelming. Applications came pouring in, from engineers, environmentalists, artists, architects, and scientists of all disciplines, each eager to contribute to Musk's new global network. But what Musk wanted was not just a collection of talented individuals, he wanted those who weren't afraid to challenge the status quo, those who looked at problems and didn't just accept them, but found new ways to solve them. In the days that followed, Musk, along with Terra and his top team at SpaceX, began to sift through the proposals, meeting with potential collaborators, and carefully selecting who would join his platform. They needed diversity in thinking, visionaries from every walk of life who were passionate about exploring new frontiers. It wasn't just about space, after all. It was about changing the very nature of how humanity approached problems, whether they were related to energy, sustainability, or exploration. One morning, Musk sat down with one of the first candidates, Dr. Evelyn Klein, a renowned biotechnologist whose work in regenerative medicine had earned her widespread recognition. She was not the typical scientist Musk had expected to work with in the past. Most of his collaborations had been centered around aerospace, automotive, and energy. But Evelyn had a vision of her own, one that aligned with his own desire to push humanity beyond its limitations. Dr. Klein, your work in biotechnology is incredible, Musk said as they sat in the conference room overlooking the sprawling SpaceX campus. But I want to know how you envision bringing your innovations to this platform. What will it take to get people to think about biology the way we think about space travel, something that is no longer a mystery but a tangible frontier? Evelyn leaned forward, her expression intense. We're at the brink of a revolution in health and biology. What if we could extend human life, make human cells more resistant to disease, or even regenerate lost tissue? But to do that, we need resources, we need minds from various disciplines working together. Space exploration is about unlocking the mysteries of the universe. What if we treated the human body the same way? Musk smiled. This was the kind of thinking he needed. So, you're suggesting we treat biology the way we do space, like an untapped frontier ready to be explored? Evelyn nodded. Exactly. If we think of biology not just as something to treat when it's broken, but as a science we can innovate and evolve like any other technological frontier, we can change how we approach everything from healthcare to longevity. Musk was impressed. He saw in Evelyn the kind of fearless visionary he had been searching for. All right, Dr. Klein, I want you on board. If we're going to change the world, we need to think beyond the stars and beyond our planet. We need to think about transforming humanity from the inside out. As the days went on, Musk's meetings grew even more diverse, bringing together a wide array of brilliant minds. Some were skeptics at first, unsure if Musk's platform could truly live up to its promises. But as the conversation unfolded, it became clear that Musk's initiative was different. This wasn't just another Silicon Valley startup. This was a call to arms for anyone who wanted to see the future unfold in their lifetimes. Among the first to join were Adrian Sorrento, a former NASA engineer with a passion for autonomous robotics, and Mei Lin, an architect whose designs were focused on sustainable cities for the future. Each had their own expertise, but all shared the same fundamental drive: they didn't just want to make money, they wanted to make an impact. And for the first time in their careers, they realized that Musk's platform offered them the opportunity to collaborate in ways they hadn't imagined before. But the real breakthrough came when a renowned climate scientist, Dr. Omar Patel, agreed to be a part of the team. Patel had long been critical of Musk's approach to environmental issues, but now, after years of facing the same bureaucratic hurdles Musk had, he found himself intrigued by the idea of a platform that would allow him to focus purely on solutions that could potentially change the course of humanity's future, without being bogged down by political gridlock. Elon, Dr. Patel said one evening, meeting with Musk privately in his office. You've been an innovator in every field you've touched. But this idea of yours could be revolutionary. I've spent my entire career in the trenches, trying to get the world to focus on climate change. And I'm tired of being told no. What you're proposing could finally be the breakthrough we need. Others, however, saw the potential of what he was proposing, a chance to break free from the chains of bureaucracy and start fresh with a vision for the future. And as Musk prepared for the next phase of his plan, he couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism that he hadn't felt in years. The critics would always be there, but this time, he wasn't fighting alone. This time, he had the entire world on his side. The idea had been set in motion, but it wasn't enough to just speak about a revolution. Elon Musk knew that if he was going to change the world, he needed more than just words, he needed action. He needed to rally the right people, those who were not only capable of thinking differently but who had the courage to follow through on those thoughts. The platform he envisioned wasn't just a tech hub, it had to be a global movement, a crucible of new ideas, experimentation, and collaboration. It was time to begin the process of gathering the brightest minds from every corner of the world. Within days of announcing the initiative, the response was overwhelming. Applications came pouring in, from engineers, environmentalists, artists, architects, and scientists of all disciplines, each eager to contribute to Musk's new global network. But what Musk wanted was not just a collection of talented individuals, he wanted those who weren't afraid to challenge the status quo, those who looked at problems and didn't just accept them, but found new ways to solve them. In the days that followed, Musk, along with Terra and his top team at SpaceX, began to sift through the proposals, meeting with potential collaborators, and carefully selecting who would join his platform. They needed diversity in thinking, visionaries from every walk of life who were passionate about exploring new frontiers. It wasn't just about space, after all. It was about changing the very nature of how humanity approached problems, whether they were related to energy, sustainability, or exploration. One morning, Musk sat down with one of the first candidates, Dr. Evelyn Klein, a renowned biotechnologist whose work in regenerative medicine had earned her widespread recognition. She was not the typical scientist Musk had expected to work with in the past. Most of his collaborations had been centered around aerospace, automotive, and energy. But Evelyn had a vision of her own, one that aligned with his own desire to push humanity beyond its limitations. Dr. Klein, your work in biotechnology is incredible, Musk said as they sat in the conference room overlooking the sprawling SpaceX campus. But I want to know how you envision bringing your innovations to this platform. What will it take to get people to think about biology the way we think about space travel, something that is no longer a mystery but a tangible frontier? He had set up the first headquarters for the platform in a sprawling, high-tech campus outside of Los Angeles. The space was designed to be open, flexible, and cutting-edge. Everything from the architecture to the digital infrastructure was built with the idea that innovation thrives when people are given freedom. The campus itself was a marvel, sustainable, self-sufficient, and designed to inspire the kind of thinking that could push humanity forward. With every new collaborator that joined the movement, the platform began to grow. Adrian Sorrento's team had started designing a series of advanced robotics to help automate the construction of new colonies on Mars, and Dr. Evelyn Klein's biotechnological innovations were already showing promise in revolutionizing medical research. Meanwhile, Mei Lin had begun developing sustainable city designs that incorporated the latest green technologies and eco-friendly building practices. Every day, new ideas were bubbling up, and the atmosphere at the headquarters was electric. There was a palpable sense of urgency, but also a sense of excitement. These weren't just employees at a company. They were pioneers, part of something far bigger than any of them could have imagined. Despite the momentum building on the platform, the outside world still remained skeptical. The media had been quick to pick up on Musk's new initiative, but there was a mix of excitement and criticism in the coverage. Some hailed it as the dawn of a new era, while others saw it as an arrogant billionaire's attempt to change the world on his own terms. But the criticism wasn't going to stop Musk. He had faced worse before and had always come out on top. The platform had also attracted the attention of some of the world's most influential figures. There was growing interest from governments, corporations, and philanthropists who saw the potential of the initiative. They were intrigued by the idea of a global innovation ecosystem that operated outside traditional constraints. And some, like Dr. Omar Patel, were already lobbying for funding to implement the next generation of green energy solutions. The media frenzy had only intensified. TV hosts and journalists were trying to get Musk to explain the finer details of his project, but he remained focused on the larger vision. He was no longer interested in discussing the minutiae. He wanted people to understand that this was about something bigger than any one individual. It was about humanity's survival, its growth, and its ability to innovate its way out of the problems it had created. One particular interview, broadcast live from the platform's headquarters, stood out. It was with a young, sharp journalist named Sarah Lawson, known for her direct approach and no-nonsense attitude. She had covered Musk's rise from a tech disruptor to one of the wealthiest men in the world, but now, she was face-to-face with him in the very environment that was fueling his latest ambition. "Mr. Musk," Sarah began, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "You've always been known for taking risks, but this platform you're building, is on another level entirely. How do you convince the world that it's not just another billionaire pet project, but something that will actually benefit humanity?" Musk sat back in his chair, considering her question carefully. He had dealt with similar questions many times before, but this one felt different. The media was beginning to understand that this wasn't just a business venture, it was a shift in how humanity viewed itself. This wasn't about a profit margin. It was about purpose. "I don't need to convince anyone," Musk replied confidently. "The work we're doing here speaks for itself. You've seen what SpaceX has done with Mars. You've seen what Tesla has done with electric cars. These aren't just companies, they're movements. And this platform is the next step. We're not asking for permission. We're building a future that works for everyone. And if that means challenging the status quo, so be it." Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but still skeptical. "But what if people don't buy into it? What if they push back? What if they say that you're trying to change things that are just fine the way they are?" Musk's gaze intensified. "People resist change because they're comfortable. But comfort isn't what got us to the moon or to Mars. It's discomfort, risk, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. The world can't stay stuck in the past. We have to move forward." The interview quickly went viral. Whether people were for or against Musk's vision, it didn't matter. The message was clear: Musk wasn't just trying to change the game, he was creating an entirely new one. Behind the scenes, Tara and the rest of the leadership team had been working tirelessly to scale up the platform. They had begun collaborating with universities, global research institutions, and even governments to push the initiative forward. Elon's idea wasn't just about getting a group of innovators together, it was about creating a new framework for solving global problems. A platform where every new discovery, invention, or breakthrough could be rapidly deployed into the real world. In one of their strategy meetings, Tara asked Musk, "What's next? What's the big move after this?" Elon thought for a moment, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the world projected in front of him. "We need to bring in the people. We need to make sure this isn't just something for the elites or the tech world. We need to democratize innovation. If we're going to change the world, we need to bring everyone along. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going global." And just like that, the next phase of Musk's platform took shape, a global outreach program aimed at bringing the brightest minds from underrepresented communities, countries, and regions into the fold. He wasn't going to let borders or lack of resources stand in the way of progress. The movement was growing faster than anyone could have imagined. The critics could shout all they wanted, but Elon Musk had proven one thing: he was never just a man with a vision. He was a man with a mission. And now, the world was beginning to see that nothing could stop him. As the global platform gained momentum, it also attracted its fair share of opponents. For every person who rallied behind Musk's vision of a new world, there was someone just as vocal in their skepticism. The world was watching closely, but not all were convinced that Musk's dream was a path toward a brighter future. In the halls of government, the business world, and even within the scientific community, whispers began to spread. Who was this billionaire, after all, who thought he could revolutionize the world on his own terms? What made him think that he could truly unite such disparate voices into one coherent force for change? While some saw the platform as a shining beacon of possibility, others viewed it as a reckless, idealistic venture that could upend the delicate balance of the current world order. The first wave of resistance came from the corporate world. Traditional industries, oil, gas, and finance, felt particularly threatened. Musk's push for sustainable energy, his disruption of the automotive industry with electric vehicles, and his focus on making humanity a multiplanetary species posed a direct challenge to their profit models. Musk was shaking the very foundations of industries that had thrived on slow-moving, entrenched systems for decades. One of the most vocal critics was Daniel Grayson, the CEO of a major oil conglomerate, and a man with an intense personal dislike of Musk. He had seen Musk as a nuisance for years, first with Tesla, then with SpaceX, and now with the platform. He feared that Musk's influence would push society too far too quickly, leaving companies like his struggling to keep up. The public was also increasingly aware of the environmental crises facing the world, and Musk's platform was positioned as a solution. Grayson and other leaders from the fossil fuel industry saw this as a direct threat to their very existence. In a private meeting with a select group of high-level executives, Grayson voiced his concerns. Musk is positioning himself as the savior of the world. But we know what happens when billionaires get too much power. He wants to push us all into a world that doesn't even make sense: electric cars, renewable energy. He's trying to change everything, and he's not asking for permission from anyone. Exactly, said another board member, a woman in her mid-50s named Karen Lowell, who oversaw the company's global investments. And now he's talking about a platform that will bring together the brightest minds in the world to reshape society. Do you think he'll stop there? He's building a new system, Daniel, and we all know he doesn't care about the rules. Grayson leaned forward, his voice a low growl. That's exactly why we need to stop him now before it goes any further. We have to leverage the power we still have, through policy, through lobbying, through influence. Musk has his followers, sure, but we can organize against this. There's too much at stake. Meanwhile, back at the platform's headquarters, Elon Musk was fully aware that resistance was inevitable. He had never expected to go unchallenged, especially after he had made such bold moves. But he knew that if he allowed himself to be distracted by the naysayers, he would never accomplish anything. His resolve was stronger than ever. The next step was crucial: he needed to demonstrate the platform's worth to the world in a way that made it undeniable. He began rallying his top team, Tara, Adrian, May, Dr. Patel, and others, for a massive, coordinated demonstration of the platform's potential. They decided to focus on an ambitious project that would showcase their ability to solve a real-world crisis: the global water shortage. Water scarcity was a growing issue across the globe, and it was already a problem in many parts of the world, particularly in Africa, Asia, and South America. The challenge was daunting, but Musk saw it as an opportunity to prove that the platform's combined expertise could lead to groundbreaking solutions. With the right technology, he believed they could not only address the immediate crisis but also ensure that future generations would have access to clean, abundant water. The team worked relentlessly on the project. Adrian's robotic engineers were tasked with creating autonomous systems that could rapidly install desalination plants in coastal regions, turning seawater into drinkable water. May and her architects designed low-cost, sustainable infrastructure that could house water purification systems and store water for communities in need. Dr. Patel and Dr. Klein worked together to develop new technologies that could recycle water more efficiently, cutting waste and ensuring that no drop went to waste. The media was abuzz as the project took shape. The world watched as this massive global effort, spearheaded by Musk's platform, began to unfold. Governments began to take notice, with several key leaders even offering to help fund the initiative, realizing the magnitude of the problem at hand. The platform was on the verge of showing its full potential, and at the same time, proving that Elon Musk wasn't just a visionary. He was a man of action. But as things were heating up in the innovation space, the corporate resistance was also intensifying. Daniel Grayson had rallied a group of influential figures in the oil and gas sectors, and they were not about to back down quietly. They organized a series of public campaigns, leveraging the media to paint Musk's platform as unrealistic and dangerously radical. They cast doubt on the technological feasibility of Musk's projects, questioning whether the global collaboration he was touting could really solve the world's problems. They warned that his vision of a future built on renewable energy and global cooperation was a pipe dream that would ultimately harm the economy. To Musk, the growing backlash was just another challenge to overcome. It had been that way since the beginning. The more people doubted him, the more he was determined to prove them wrong. He wasn't just fighting for new technology, he was fighting for a new way of thinking. He was fighting for a future where innovation wasn't shackled by the weight of old systems. The more resistance he encountered, the more fuel it provided for his drive to succeed. Still, Musk knew that the stakes were higher than ever. If he couldn't demonstrate real results soon, the naysayers would have the upper hand. Time was running out. The platform's success would ultimately be determined by its ability to push through the resistance and deliver tangible, world-changing results. Musk knew that if they could pull off the water project, if they could prove that their collective innovation could make a real difference, there would be no more room for doubt. The resistance might grow, but it would be irrelevant if the platform could achieve what it set out to do. The global water project had to succeed. There was no other option. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The global water crisis is real, and together, we can change the future. How can we take action right now to ensure a better tomorrow? The morning news broadcast began with a dramatic headline: Global Water Initiative faces major setback, is Elon Musk's dream falling apart? Musk sat in his private office, staring at the screen. His brow furrowed, his fingers tapping impatiently on the desk. The reports were claiming that the first large-scale desalination plant, located off the coast of Morocco, had encountered a catastrophic malfunction. What was meant to be a symbol of hope had turned into a public relations nightmare. The malfunction occurred just days after the plant had been activated, and the system designed to filter seawater and convert it into drinking water had failed. A critical error in the desalination process had led to the release of a toxic byproduct into the surrounding water. The disaster left several nearby coastal communities without access to clean water and turned the media frenzy into an outright attack on Musk's platform. The international press painted the failure as a direct consequence of Musk's ambitious yet reckless approach. The media's attack was immediate and relentless. Headlines like, "Is Elon Musk in over his head?" and "Water Crisis Exposed, Elon Musk's Pipe Dream Hits a Dead End," dominated news outlets worldwide. Social media was equally unforgiving. Thousands of posts and tweets accused Musk of prioritizing speed over safety, of pushing the boundaries of technology without considering the real-world implications. But Musk wasn't about to fold. This setback was just that, a setback. He had encountered failures before, and he had always come back stronger. It was part of his philosophy: innovation and progress required risk, and with risk came failure. The important thing was how you responded. He called an emergency meeting with the team: Tara, Adrian, May, Dr. Patel, Dr. Klein, and several other key players. The atmosphere was tense as they sat around a sleek, high-tech conference table. Musk stood at the front of the room, his posture tense but resolute. "This is not the end. This is just a test," Musk began, his voice firm. "I know we've encountered a huge obstacle, but we've dealt with worse. Remember the Falcon 1 failure? That was supposed to be the end of SpaceX, but look where we are now." Tara, the platform's chief operations officer, nodded. "You're right, Elon. This was a huge error, and it will hurt us in the short term. But the important thing is how we move forward. We need to get to the root of the issue quickly, fix it, and show the world that we can turn this around." Adrian, the robotics engineer, spoke up. "I'm already assembling a team to investigate the failure. We need to understand exactly what went wrong and ensure this doesn't happen again. I'm confident we can fix the problem, it's a matter of recalibrating the system." Dr. Klein, the biotechnologist, chimed in. "In the meantime, we should also look into alternative methods for purifying water. If we can bring in backup solutions, it might help with the PR side of things while we work on the desalination plant. May, the architect responsible for designing the sustainable cities, leaned forward. We're going to need more than just a quick fix. We need to prove to the world that we can handle large-scale projects like this without causing harm. I suggest we also roll out a new initiative focused on water purification systems that can be deployed on a smaller, community level. These should be more adaptable and less likely to cause systemic failures. Musk absorbed all their suggestions. He knew they were right. They had to show the world that the failure was just a bump in the road, that they could learn from it and adapt quickly. He couldn't afford to let this single setback define the platform's legacy. This will be a defining moment for us, Musk said, his voice hardening with resolve. We're not just going to fix the problem, we're going to come back stronger. We'll not only fix the desalination plant, we'll create a new model for large-scale water purification that the world will rely on. Let's get to work. The meeting ended with the sense that they were all in this together. But as the team began to mobilize, the external pressure continued to mount. The media didn't let up, and neither did the critics. Daniel Grayson's oil empire seized the opportunity to further cast doubt on Musk's abilities, using the water crisis as a way to fuel their argument that Musk was out of his depth. In a televised interview, Grayson made his position clear. Elon Musk might be great at launching rockets, but the real world isn't as simple as solving equations in a lab. The failure of his water purification initiative is proof that his vision is dangerously unrealistic. The world needs practical solutions, not someone's fantasy. Grayson's words echoed across the globe, and the public began to question whether Musk could truly handle the pressure of overseeing such monumental projects. But Musk knew he couldn't afford to play defense. He had to act. And fast. Behind the scenes, Terra and the leadership team began crafting a rapid response strategy. They needed to control the narrative before it spiraled even further. They worked with top-tier PR firms, set up meetings with world leaders, and initiated a global campaign to highlight the other aspects of the platform's work that were succeeding. They couldn't let the water crisis define their platform, they needed to push forward on all fronts. At the same time, Adrian and his team worked tirelessly to fix the issues with the desalination plant. They traced the malfunction to a software bug in the automation system, which had led to a malfunctioning filtration process. It was a simple error in design that had spiraled out of control, but they were confident they could correct it quickly. Adrian's team worked around the clock, writing new code and recalibrating the systems. The platform also began to roll out new water purification initiatives at a smaller, community-focused level. These systems, while not as large as the desalination plant, were designed to be rapidly deployable in areas that were already suffering from water shortages. They were a practical response to the crisis and showed that Musk's platform was not just about big, flashy projects, but also about real-world solutions that could make a tangible difference. As the weeks passed, the narrative began to shift. The media, while still critical, started to acknowledge the platform's swift response. Adrian's team managed to fix the desalination plant's issues, and it was soon up and running again. The smaller-scale water purification systems began to be deployed across several African countries, providing relief to communities that desperately needed it. Musk knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more setbacks, more challenges. But if there was one thing he had learned over the years, it was that nothing worth doing ever came easy. The world was watching, and now, more than ever, he had to prove that the platform was not just a dream, but a reality that could change the world. The resistance had grown louder, but Musk's resolve had only strengthened. This wasn't just about one setback, it was about building a future. And no matter how many obstacles were thrown in his path, Musk was determined to keep moving forward. The months following the water crisis were marked by both triumph and tribulation. While the platform's efforts to address global water shortages gained momentum, there was still much work to be done. The media continued to scrutinize every step Musk took, eager to find new faults in his grand vision. Yet, as each challenge was met, Musk's resolve only grew stronger. His team had become more cohesive, more resilient, and more focused. But even with their efforts, there was a missing piece, someone with the kind of influence that could take the platform to the next level. It came in the form of Abigail Walker, a well-known philanthropist and former tech mogul. Abigail had sold her previous tech company years ago and retired from the public eye, preferring to focus on large-scale charitable initiatives. But she had always admired Musk's ambition and, despite the setbacks, she saw the potential of his platform. She had been watching closely and had noticed something: while the platform's mission was bold, it lacked the kind of strategic partnerships that could bring it the stability and legitimacy it needed to succeed. Abigail knew this was the time to step in. She had influence, resources, and a network of world leaders and entrepreneurs that could open doors for Musk's platform in ways that Musk's own reputation couldn't. After a few weeks of careful consideration, she reached out to Musk. It was a rainy afternoon when Musk received the invitation. He was seated in his office, going over some reports about new projects related to energy efficiency, when his assistant dropped the email on his desk. Subject: a conversation about the future. The email was simple, just a few lines, but the content was anything but. Abigail Walker wanted to meet with Musk to discuss a potential partnership that could help transform his platform from an ambitious idea into a lasting legacy. Musk had always been skeptical about outsiders stepping into his world. He had made a name for himself by defying conventional expectations, after all. But there was something intriguing about Abigail's offer. She wasn't just any investor or business mogul. She was a philanthropist who had turned her attention toward causes that aligned with Musk's platform, and her reputation as a leader in global initiatives was unparalleled. Perhaps she could bring the right kind of resources to the table. He replied almost immediately, "Let's meet. I think there's much we can discuss." A few days later, they met in Musk's headquarters. Abigail walked into the conference room with a calm, composed presence. She was dressed in a sharp, business-like outfit, exuding confidence and experience. Musk stood to greet her, and the two exchanged pleasantries before diving straight into the conversation. "I've been watching your progress, Elon," Abigail began, her tone measured but enthusiastic. "I believe in what you're trying to do here. The water crisis was a setback, yes, but you've responded faster and more effectively than anyone anticipated. That speaks volumes." Musk nodded, leaning back in his chair. "We've had to move fast, but we're making real progress. The water project will be up and running again soon, and we've already deployed solutions that are helping communities in need." Abigail smiled slightly. "But you know that's not enough, right? To truly make this work, you need more than just innovation. You need structure. You need partnerships with governments, international organizations, and corporations. You need someone who can broker these deals and get the right people in your corner." Musk raised an eyebrow. "I've never been one for the old guard, Abigail. I'm not here to play the game the way it's been played before. I want to build something different." "I understand," she said, "but sometimes, you need to play the game to change the rules. Look, I'm not here to tell you how to do things. I'm here to offer you what I can: a network of connections, the influence to open doors, and the credibility to back up your platform. People will take you seriously when they see you've aligned with someone they trust. And trust me, you're going to need that now more than ever." Musk thought for a moment, clearly weighing his options. He wasn't thrilled at the thought of aligning with someone who represented the old guard, but he understood the value of her offer. Perhaps there was room for someone like Abigail in this new world he was trying to build, a world where new ideas and old institutions didn't have to be mutually exclusive. "I'm willing to listen," Musk said, his voice cautious but intrigued. "But I have one condition: I need to maintain control over the direction of this platform. I won't let it become just another corporate machine." Abigail nodded, her expression unwavering. "That's exactly why I'm here, Elon. To help you keep your vision intact while giving you the leverage you need to move forward. There's room for you to grow, without compromising your ideals. Together, we can make this happen." The conversation continued for several hours, with Abigail presenting a detailed plan of action. She had already made contacts with key figures in global governance, non-profit organizations, and even rival tech companies who had expressed interest in working with Musk's platform under the right conditions. The idea was to combine Musk's innovation and bold vision with the support of those who had the experience and power to bring it to the world stage. By the end of the meeting, Musk had agreed to bring Abigail on board as an official advisor. It wasn't a partnership he had anticipated, but it was one that made sense. He could focus on the big picture, the technology, the innovation, the vision, while Abigail could handle the diplomacy, the negotiation, and the strategic partnerships. It was a practical solution that allowed him to stay true to his ideals while ensuring the platform had the credibility and stability it needed to survive in a world that was increasingly skeptical of his ambitious goals. The next few months were transformative. With Abigail's help, Musk's platform started to gain significant traction. The water project, which had once been seen as a failure, was now a model of resilience and innovation. The global community began to rally behind it, with several countries signing agreements to deploy water purification systems on a large scale. And even some of Musk's fiercest critics started to soften their stance. Daniel Grayson, for example, had been forced to re-evaluate his opposition to Musk's initiatives. Though he continued to challenge Musk publicly, privately he had begun to acknowledge the successes of the platform. It wasn't an easy thing to admit, but the tide was turning, and even the oil mogul couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that Musk's way might, in fact, be the future. Abigail's influence had made all the difference. She had connected Musk to the right people, built bridges where there were once walls, and shown the world that Musk was capable of leading in ways that didn't involve alienating those who might be his allies. As Musk stood in front of a crowd of world leaders at a United Nations summit, announcing a new partnership for sustainable energy, he couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. He had come a long way since the early days of SpaceX and Tesla, but this was the culmination of all his work. The world was finally starting to take notice. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about collaboration, about changing the way the world worked. And, with Abigail by his side, he knew that anything was possible. The day had arrived. The much-anticipated global summit on sustainable energy and climate change was taking place, and Elon Musk was set to give the keynote speech. It was an event that had garnered worldwide attention, and all eyes were on him. After months of working alongside Abigail Walker to create the right partnerships and lay the groundwork for his platform's success, Musk was ready to unveil something revolutionary. He was about to show the world that his platform wasn't just a collection of isolated projects, it was the future. For the past few weeks, Musk had been preparing for this moment. He had been working with top-tier engineers, environmental scientists, and global leaders to present a solution that would tackle not only water shortages but also the broader issues of energy scarcity and environmental degradation. This wasn't just another presentation on innovation, this was going to be a bold declaration of intent, a roadmap for the future of the planet. Musk stood backstage, surrounded by his closest advisors, including Abigail, Tara, Adrian, and May. The room was filled with a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. There was a lot riding on this speech, not just for Musk, but for the platform and all of its supporters. The stakes were higher than ever. If this presentation failed, the backlash could be catastrophic. Abigail, ever the professional, placed a reassuring hand on Musk's shoulder. "You've got this," she said quietly, offering a smile that conveyed confidence and calm. "The world is ready for this." Musk nodded, though inside, he was still feeling the pressure. But he had been here before, on the launch pad of countless ventures, facing the impossible. It was what he did best. He wasn't afraid to fail, but he was determined to make sure that today, success was inevitable. The stage lights dimmed, and the crowd hushed. The time had come. Musk walked to the podium, adjusting the microphone. He looked out over the sea of faces, government officials, scientists, activists, CEOs, and journalists. He knew that some of them were skeptics, some of them were rooting for him to fail, and others were hoping that his vision would be the solution to humanity's most pressing challenges. He took a deep breath, cleared his throat, and began. We are standing at the crossroads of history. The decisions we make today will shape the future of our planet, of our children, and of generations yet to come. Our world is facing crises on multiple fronts: water shortages, energy scarcity, climate change, challenges that threaten the very fabric of life as we know it. These challenges are not insurmountable, but they require action, bold and immediate action. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle in. We've seen what happens when we delay. We've seen what happens when we let fear and complacency hold us back. But today, I am here to tell you that we have the power to change the trajectory of our future. It is not a question of whether we can do it, it is a question of whether we have the courage to act. The crowd was still. Musk's voice had a quiet intensity that made his words hit harder than any grandiose rhetoric could. We've already begun to change the world. We've proven that it's possible to generate sustainable energy at scale. We've proven that it's possible to turn the tide on water scarcity with innovative desalination technology. But we're not stopping there. Today, I am unveiling a new initiative, a global, interconnected network of sustainable energy and water purification systems that will not only address these crises but provide solutions to the communities that need them the most. As the audience leaned in, Musk clicked a button on the podium. The massive screen behind him flickered to life, showing a visual map of interconnected energy and water systems designed to operate in synergy. It was a stunning, complex network: solar farms in deserts, wind turbines off coastlines, water desalination plants along coastlines, and efficient power storage systems that would provide renewable energy to remote and underserved areas of the world. This wasn't just a patchwork of solutions, it was an integrated, global system that could meet the needs of billions. This is the future, Musk continued, his tone resolute. Imagine a world where clean energy is abundant, where water is no longer a luxury but a fundamental right. Imagine communities around the world, especially in regions hardest hit by climate change, having access to the resources they need to thrive. This is not science fiction. This is our reality, if we act now. He paused again, letting the weight of his vision settle over the room. This is the power of collaboration. This is the power of innovation. And most importantly, this is the power of people coming together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The audience erupted into applause. It wasn't the kind of applause Musk was used to, the polite clapping after a well-executed presentation. No, this was different. This was a recognition that Musk wasn't just talking about big ideas anymore. He was showing the world that he had the blueprint for something that could actually change the world. People could see the potential, and they could feel the possibility. As the applause continued, Musk stepped back from the podium, allowing the presentation to sink in. But the work wasn't over yet. He knew that the real challenge lay ahead, not in showing the world that he could dream big, but in making those dreams a reality. Later that evening, after the summit had ended, Musk stood with Abigail and his team in the private lounge of a nearby hotel. The tension of the day had faded, replaced with a sense of cautious optimism. "You did it," Abigail said, her voice low but full of admiration. "You gave the world something to believe in. Now it's our job to make sure we turn that belief into action." Musk nodded but didn't say anything. His mind was already racing ahead, thinking about the next steps, securing the necessary investments, negotiating with governments, making sure the infrastructure was in place to support the project. This wasn't a finish line, it was just another beginning. "I know we've just made a huge statement," Musk said, "but the real work starts tomorrow. We need to follow through on this. We need to deliver. This isn't just about getting a headline, it's about changing lives." Abigail smiled, and it was a rare smile of understanding. She had seen the relentless drive in Musk before, and she knew that the hard part was still ahead. But she also knew that there was no one better equipped to handle it. As they talked late into the night, the world outside the hotel windows was still buzzing with excitement over the announcement. Musk's vision had captured the imagination of millions. But for Musk and his team, this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, they would begin to turn that vision into reality. The days following the global summit were filled with a whirlwind of activity. Elon Musk's announcement had reverberated around the world, sparking a renewed sense of hope and urgency in governments, corporations, and activists alike. Media outlets couldn't stop talking about his bold vision for a sustainable future, and the global reaction was, for the most part, overwhelmingly positive. But as with any grand idea, there were skeptics, many of them powerful people with stakes in the status quo who didn't take kindly to the disruption Musk was proposing. It didn't take long for Musk to realize that while the support was growing, so too was the opposition. The power players who had long benefited from fossil fuels, outdated water systems, and unsustainable energy practices weren't just going to step aside. As Musk's platform gained traction, they began to quietly circle, looking for ways to undermine his plans. And it wasn't just from the expected corners of the corporate world, some governments, too, were starting to raise concerns. One of the most vocal critics was Gregory Pollard, the CEO of one of the largest oil companies in the world, Petroglobal. Pollard had publicly denounced Musk's vision, claiming it was nothing more than a pipe dream and that it would destroy jobs in traditional energy sectors. Musk had always expected this kind of opposition. After all, challenging the status quo often meant upsetting those who thrived in the current system. But what was concerning was the growing number of allies Pollard was gathering. Behind the scenes, Pollard and other figures in the energy industry began lobbying influential government officials, pushing them to create regulations that would limit Musk's ability to operate on the global stage. They argued that the rapid deployment of renewable energy infrastructure would destabilize the global economy and that Musk's water purification technologies could harm local industries reliant on traditional water distribution systems. It wasn't a direct attack, but rather a slow, calculated campaign to create roadblocks. For Musk, this was just another battle he had to fight, but the stakes were higher than ever. If these efforts gained momentum, his vision could be derailed before it even had a chance to fully take root. The platform had made incredible strides, but it was fragile. Any significant legal or regulatory hurdles could send it spiraling. Abigail Walker had seen this play out before. She had worked with countless leaders and philanthropists, and she knew that fighting powerful industries required more than just innovation, it required careful strategy, diplomacy, and sometimes a bit of cunning. Musk, we need to prepare for the fight that's coming, Abigail said one evening, as they sat together in her office, reviewing the latest developments. The lobbyists are already moving, and soon, we'll have to contend with political pushback. We're already hearing rumblings from some key players who are concerned about the impact your platform will have on their economies. Musk, who had been staring out the window, deep in thought, turned to face her. I expected this. It's the same playbook they've used for decades. But we can't back down now. This is bigger than us. It's bigger than them. Abigail nodded. I agree. But it's going to take more than just us pushing back. We need allies in government, people who will back our platform, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's politically expedient for them to do so. We'll need to make some moves. Musk's mind raced. He had always believed in doing things his way, but this time, he was starting to see the nuances of the political landscape. He couldn't just out-innovate the opposition. He needed to outthink them, too. I'll reach out to some contacts. Maybe we can build a coalition of progressive governments and businesses that are more forward-thinking, Musk said, determination in his voice. It's time to shift the conversation away from fear and resistance and focus on the opportunities we're creating. Abigail smiled, seeing that familiar fire in his eyes. Good. Let's do it. The following weeks were filled with strategy meetings, both public and private. Musk and Abigail traveled to several countries, speaking with government leaders and businesses to form alliances. Their goal was to show that sustainable energy and water purification could create jobs, strengthen economies, and provide solutions to the growing challenges of climate change and resource scarcity. It wasn't enough to just promote the technology, it had to be framed as an opportunity for everyone. Musk's vision was starting to gain traction in places that had previously been hesitant. Countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of Europe were eager to adopt his technologies. These nations had long struggled with energy access and clean water, and Musk's proposal offered a chance for them to leapfrog the traditional, expensive infrastructure. For them, Musk wasn't just an innovator, he was a savior. But while these countries were on board, others, like the United States, were slow to move. The political divide was wide, and many key political figures were still hesitant to back Musk, despite the clear benefits. There was a delicate balancing act to play. Musk needed the support of the US government to scale his platform, but he also had to be careful not to alienate other countries that were already on board. Then, a breakthrough came. Abigail's network of contacts proved invaluable once again. A key ally, Senator Elena Rodriguez, came out in support of Musk's initiative during a highly publicized speech. Rodriguez, a rising star in the Senate, had been working on green energy policies for years, and she saw Musk's platform as the missing piece of the puzzle. She publicly endorsed his vision, framing it as the future of both the American economy and the global climate fight. Her endorsement was a game-changer. It wasn't just a political victory for Musk, it was a rallying cry for others who had been too cautious to take a stand. As Senator Rodriguez spoke about the transformative potential of Musk's platform, other political leaders began to take notice. Slowly but surely, momentum was building. But just as things seemed to be turning in his favor, another challenge emerged. Pollard and his allies weren't content with simply lobbying behind the scenes, they began making their move in the public eye. One morning, Musk woke to a barrage of headlines. Musk's platform, a dangerous gamble on the global economy. Oil and energy leaders urge caution over Musk's unrealistic vision. Senator Rodriguez endorses risky tech for America's future. The backlash had begun. Pollard had begun using his vast media influence to turn public opinion against Musk. His campaign focused on the dangers of disrupting the global energy sector too quickly and warned that Musk's plans could lead to massive job losses in traditional industries. Musk wasn't surprised. He had been expecting the pushback to escalate, but it still stung. The battle was now moving into the court of public opinion, and every misstep would be exploited. Abigail turned to Musk as they reviewed the headlines together. This is only the beginning. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their interests. But you've faced worse before, and you've come out on top. It's time to fight fire with fire. Musk's eyes narrowed. He knew that this was a defining moment. The only way forward was to stand his ground, double down on his vision, and, most importantly, continue to build the alliances that would make his platform unstoppable. He stood up, a determined look on his face. It's time to show them just how wrong they are. The opposition was growing, but Elon Musk had always been a man who thrived under pressure. Despite the mounting criticism from powerful figures in the energy sector and the media frenzy stirred up by Gregory Pollard's campaign, Musk remained unwavering. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that his platform was far too important to allow it to be derailed by the forces of the status quo. Now, it was time for a new strategy, one that would require more than just technological innovation. It was time to engage with the political landscape on a whole new level. Abigail Walker had been preparing for this moment. She had seen this kind of battle before, watching as others tried, and failed, to navigate the complex world of politics. But Musk wasn't like other entrepreneurs. He had something the others didn't, the ability to see the big picture and push past short-term obstacles to reach long-term goals. We need to do more than just counterattack. We need to take the fight to them, Abigail said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. We can't just defend the platform, we need to actively reshape the narrative. Musk looked thoughtful, sipping his coffee as he listened to her. You're right. We've been playing defense, but we need to be more aggressive with our messaging. We've got to remind the public that this isn't just about us, it's about the future of humanity. Abigail nodded. Exactly. The resistance isn't just about protecting jobs in the oil industry or maintaining the status quo. It's about the fear of change, the fear of the unknown. If we can turn that fear into excitement, into hope, we can win the hearts and minds of the public. It was a simple yet powerful idea. Musk had always been good at stirring people's imaginations with his vision of the future. He had done it with space exploration, with electric cars, and now it was time to do it with the fight for sustainable energy and water systems. But he needed to make sure the message was not only hopeful but also undeniable. The next day, Musk held a meeting with his team. Abigail, Tara, Adrian, May, and several key advisors gathered around a large table in the conference room. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a shared determination in the air. They all knew what was at stake. "We've got a two-pronged strategy," Musk began, addressing the group. "First, we need to focus on solidifying our alliances with the countries and organizations that have already supported us. We need to secure commitments from local governments, and we need to keep pushing the narrative of opportunity, not just for their economies but for the global community. Second," Musk continued, his voice gaining intensity, "we need to take the fight directly to the media. We've got to make sure that every time Pollard and his cronies spread misinformation, we've got a louder, more compelling voice in the conversation." Tara, his communications director, spoke up. "We'll need to ramp up our media outreach, get high-profile influencers on our side, do interviews, and create content that can go viral. We'll also need a strategic ad campaign that focuses on the positive impact of sustainable energy. But we can't just rely on traditional outlets. Social media is where we can make the most noise." Musk nodded, impressed by her focus. "Exactly. We need to make sure that our message isn't just being heard by the elites in boardrooms. We need to reach the everyday person, the ones who are most affected by climate change, water scarcity, and energy shortages. They're the ones who will drive the demand for our solutions." Abigail, ever the strategist, added, "And while we're doing that, we'll need to keep building our network of political allies." Senator Elena Rodriguez's endorsement was just the beginning. "We need more leaders, particularly in swing states and regions where the resistance is the strongest. If we can get bipartisan support, it'll be hard for Pollard and his allies to continue to push their narrative." Musk turned to Adrian, who had been quietly observing the discussion. "Adrian, I want you to start reaching out to some of the key players in Congress and other government officials. We need to secure the political backing we'll need for the long haul." Adrian nodded. "I'll get on it. I'll start lining up meetings with key senators and representatives who might be open to the idea. It won't be easy, but we have to make the case that the long-term benefits far outweigh the short-term pain." Musk smiled, the familiar spark of determination lighting up his eyes. "Good. Let's do this." In the weeks that followed, the intensity of the battle ramped up. Musk's team worked tirelessly, pushing out a steady stream of content to counteract Pollard's campaign. They released compelling stories about communities in Africa and Southeast Asia that had already benefited from Musk's technology, stories of villages once crippled by droughts now thriving with access to clean water, or remote areas gaining access to renewable energy that would have been impossible to obtain otherwise. At the same time, the political maneuvering grew more intense. Adrian successfully secured a few high-profile meetings with members of Congress, some of whom were skeptical but willing to listen. The meetings were intense, filled with questions and concerns about the potential impact of Musk's plans on local industries and economies. But Adrian, with Musk's support, was able to frame the conversation as one about growth, innovation, and the need for bold leadership in a rapidly changing world. But the opposition wasn't backing down either. Pollard's media campaign continued to churn out negative stories, warning about job losses and the dangers of radical solutions. One of his more aggressive moves was to fund a series of TV commercials that featured workers in the energy sector speaking out against Musk's ideas, arguing that they would cost them their livelihoods. Musk's team responded with a counter-campaign, featuring testimonials from people who had made the transition from traditional industries to the renewable sector. They showed real people, workers, families, and entrepreneurs, who had benefited from the shift to sustainable energy. It wasn't just about replacing one job with another, it was about creating entirely new industries and opportunities. The media battle raged on, but the pressure was starting to mount on Pollard and his allies. Public opinion was beginning to shift. People were starting to see the potential in Musk's vision, and the growing support from politicians was hard to ignore. But the fight was far from over. As the next big vote in Congress loomed, Musk knew that the real test was just beginning. He had managed to secure some key victories, but the resistance was strong, and the political landscape was still a battlefield. Abigail was pacing the room, her mind working a mile a minute as she prepared for the coming weeks. "We're close," she said. "But we can't let up. We need to keep the pressure on, make sure we have the support when it matters most." Musk stared out the window, thinking about the weeks ahead. The media war, the political wrangling, it was all a necessary part of the process. But what mattered most was the ultimate goal, making sure that the future of energy and water wasn't left in the hands of those who were afraid to change. He turned to Abigail, determination in his eyes. "We've come this far. There's no going back now." The weeks leading up to the crucial vote in Congress were tense. Musk's team had been working around the clock, navigating political waters, managing media attacks, and securing support for his platform. The narrative was shifting, but slowly, too slowly, for some. Gregory Pollard and his powerful allies weren't giving up, and their influence was felt across the country. Every day, new commercials, articles, and expert testimonies were flooding the airwaves, painting Musk's vision as reckless, untested, and dangerous for the American economy. But Musk had always known that change wasn't easy. It never had been. The harder the fight, the greater the rewards. And in moments like this, when things seemed at their most difficult, Musk had learned that it was the moments of doubt that revealed who was truly committed to the cause. Still, the pressure was mounting. The media campaigns were relentless, and the political opposition was no less severe. The oil industry's grip on power in Washington was formidable, and the legislative environment wasn't exactly favorable for drastic, immediate changes. Some were advocating for compromise, for taking incremental steps instead of going all in on Musk's revolutionary platform. But Elon Musk wasn't someone who did things incrementally. One night, just days before the vote, Musk found himself alone in his office, staring at the stack of papers detailing the votes. Some of the names were allies, but others were still on the fence, politicians who had expressed cautious interest but hadn't committed yet. The big question was whether there were enough to push the initiative through. Without those key votes, the entire platform could collapse before it even began. "Abigail," Musk called, pushing a button on his desk intercom. "I need to see you." Abigail entered a few minutes later, her face set in a determined expression. She had the sharpness of a strategist, and that was exactly what Musk needed at this moment. "What's on your mind, Elon?" she asked, her voice steady. Musk leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the documents. "We need to change the game. We're on the edge of something big, but it's not enough to play by the usual rules. We need a plan that makes it impossible for them to deny us." Abigail crossed her arms and considered his words. "I agree. The usual tactics aren't cutting it anymore. But we've got to be careful. If we push too hard, we risk alienating the moderates we've managed to bring on board." Musk gave her a knowing look. "I'm not talking about pushing harder. I'm talking about taking control of the narrative once and for all. We have to make it clear to every politician in that room, this is a vote for the future of humanity. There can be no room for hesitation. No middle ground." Abigail thought for a moment. Then, a sly smile crept onto her face. "You're talking about a game changer, aren't you?" Musk's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. We take the fight directly to the voters. Forget the media. Forget the politicians. We make sure that every person in this country knows what's at stake. We make them understand why this matters, not just to their children, but to their grandchildren." The plan was set into motion immediately. Musk's team, along with Abigail's network of allies, began preparing a nationwide grassroots campaign that would flood the country with an undeniable message. It wasn't just a message about technology or energy, it was a message about the future. They would use a combination of targeted social media campaigns, viral videos, and a series of town hall-style events across the country, hosted by influencers and celebrities who were already backing Musk's platform. The goal was simple: to show the public what they stood to lose if the initiative failed. The focus was on the young people who were most concerned about the future, climate change, water scarcity, and the inequities in the energy sector. Musk knew that if the younger generation rallied behind his cause, they would put pressure on their elected officials. They could no longer afford to ignore the will of the people. The first major event was held in Los Angeles, broadcast live across social media platforms, with celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio and Emma Watson joining Musk to speak about the future of sustainable energy. The event was a massive success, drawing tens of millions of viewers worldwide. Musk spoke passionately about his vision, and the audience could feel his sincerity. "Look, we're not just fighting for the here and now," Musk said in his speech. "We're fighting for our children. For our grandchildren. For every person who will inherit this planet. We don't have the luxury of waiting any longer. If we don't act now, we may be too late." The room erupted in applause, but it wasn't just the people at the event who were inspired. The broadcast sparked a massive wave of support across the country. Social media flooded with hashtags like #FutureFirst and #WeNeedChange, and a groundswell of support for Musk's platform grew by the hour. Pollard and his allies were quick to respond. They accused Musk of manipulating the public, of using emotional rhetoric to sway voters without offering a concrete plan. But despite their best efforts, the momentum was building, and it was clear that the tide was turning. Abigail watched the statistics pour in as the campaign reached a fever pitch. "This is it," she said. "The public is responding. We've got their attention, and we've made it clear to Congress that this is about more than just policy, it's about the survival of our planet." Musk nodded, his face a mask of determination. "Now we wait. The vote's coming up. But I believe this will be the moment that changes everything." The days leading up to the vote were filled with anticipation. News outlets carried stories about the impending decision, and debates raged in Congress. Politicians were receiving pressure from all sides, but the growing wave of public support was undeniable. More and more senators and representatives began to voice their support for Musk's platform, including some of the moderates who had been previously hesitant. As the final vote approached, Pollard's allies made one last push to derail the initiative, but it was clear that their campaign was faltering. They had underestimated the power of public opinion and the way Musk had turned the tables. The grassroots movement was unstoppable. The day of the vote arrived, and the halls of Congress were filled with tension. Musk, Abigail, and their team watched from a nearby room, waiting for the results. The minutes seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, the announcement came. The platform had passed. Musk's eyes shone with quiet triumph. They had done it. The next phase of his plan was now a reality. Victory, it seemed, was just the beginning. While the platform had been passed and Musk's vision had gained significant traction, the battle was far from over. The political arena may have been conquered for now, but the opposition was preparing for its next move, one that would challenge Musk's ability to maintain control and put his initiative to the ultimate test. As soon as the vote was confirmed, a new wave of backlash swept across the country. The media, which had initially started to turn in Musk's favor, now faced new pressure from industries that stood to lose the most. The oil and gas companies, along with powerful lobbies, had always known that Musk's platform represented a fundamental shift in the global economy, one that threatened their very existence. And they weren't going to go down without a fight. It didn't take long for new ads to appear on television, flooding the airwaves. These were different from the ones Musk had seen before, these were more insidious, more personal. They featured real stories from workers in the energy industry who feared for their jobs, who argued that Musk's ambitious plans would destroy entire communities and leave families without livelihoods. The ads painted a grim picture, one where the transition to renewable energy wasn't a smooth shift but a brutal and painful process that would leave millions suffering. As Musk watched the new wave of commercials, he couldn't help but feel a wave of frustration. His team had worked tirelessly to reach the hearts and minds of the public, but now it seemed like all that work could be undone in a matter of days. It was a fight he knew he had to win, there was no turning back now. A few days later, Abigail and Musk were having a quiet discussion in his office. The room was dimly lit, the only sound being the faint hum of the city outside. It was late, but neither of them had gotten much sleep in the past few weeks. Musk sat behind his desk, his gaze fixed on the digital screens in front of him. Abigail paced around the room, tapping her fingers on the table as she spoke. "They're coming after us harder now," Abigail said, her tone tight with frustration. "These new ads are a direct attack on everything we've built. If we don't respond, we risk losing everything we've worked for." "I know," Musk replied, his voice quieter than usual. "But we can't fight fire with fire. The public isn't buying that fear-based rhetoric anymore. We've seen the data. People are tired of being manipulated." Abigail stopped pacing and turned to him, her eyes intense. "Then we fight back with something stronger, truth. We make sure they know the real story behind these workers, these communities. We show them the transformation that's already happening in places we've helped. We don't just defend ourselves, we show them what their future could be if they choose to join us." Musk thought for a moment, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. He knew Abigail was right, playing defense wasn't going to win this fight. It wasn't enough to deny the claims made by the opposition, they had to offer something better, something that people could believe in. It wasn't just about renewable energy, it was about hope. "Let's take it further," Musk said suddenly. "We need to show them real-world examples, give them stories they can connect with. Let's visit the communities that have benefited from our platforms. Let's go directly to the heart of the issue and make it personal." Abigail's eyes lit up. "You're thinking of a road tour? A nationwide trip to see the impact firsthand?" "Exactly," Musk said, a determined glint in his eyes. "We take the truth directly to the people. We show them that change doesn't have to be painful. It can be an opportunity, one that they don't want to miss." The idea was bold, and it was risky. But if there was anyone who could pull it off, it was Elon Musk. Over the next few days, the team began planning the nationwide tour. Musk would visit key cities and towns where the transition to sustainable energy had already begun, meeting with workers who had successfully transitioned into new industries and families who had benefited from the new water systems. He would speak at community centers, schools, and local gatherings, giving speeches that weren't just about the future of energy but about the hope that could be brought to every corner of the country. The media would be there too, capturing every moment. They would get to see real people, real stories, families that had once been skeptical, now thriving because of the changes Musk's platform had brought. The first stop was in a small town in West Virginia, a place that had long been tied to the coal industry. For decades, the town had relied on coal mining for its livelihood. But now, with coal production dwindling and the community struggling to find a way forward, the introduction of Musk's renewable energy platform had been a godsend. Musk arrived to a warm welcome. The town was still feeling the pain of job loss, but there was also a sense of optimism in the air. Families who had once been uncertain about the future were now embracing the changes, many of them working in solar power installations or maintaining the new water filtration systems that Musk's platform had provided. One of the first people Musk met was Robert, a former coal miner who had struggled to adapt when the mines had closed. But now, Robert was working as a solar panel technician, part of a growing industry that was changing his town for the better. "Without this platform, I don't know where I'd be," Robert said, his face breaking into a smile as he spoke to Musk. "I thought I'd be stuck in a dead-end job forever. But now, I'm part of something bigger, something that's going to last. This is the future." Musk's heart swelled with pride as he listened. This was the message he needed to send to the world, that the future didn't have to be scary. Change could be an opportunity, not a threat. The visit was a success, with local media outlets covering every aspect of the event. But it wasn't just about the media coverage, it was about the people who had lived through the transformation, who had experienced firsthand the impact of Musk's vision. As the tour continued, more and more communities joined in, telling their stories, sharing their triumphs. Musk knew the battle wasn't over. But now, he had something the opposition couldn't fight, the truth. As Musk's nationwide tour continued, momentum shifted in a way he hadn't fully anticipated. What started as a series of local events aimed at demonstrating the impact of his platform began to snowball into something far larger. The grassroots movement Musk had ignited started to grow exponentially. People were not just interested in the technology, they were starting to believe in the bigger idea, in the vision Musk had painted for a sustainable future. Social media was abuzz. Hashtags like #MuskNation, #ChangeIsNow, and #FutureFirst started trending, and it was no longer just tech enthusiasts or environmental activists who were rallying around Musk's cause. Everyday Americans, from factory workers to schoolteachers, were joining in. They weren't just watching from the sidelines, they were becoming part of the movement, sharing their own stories of hope and transformation. As Musk made his way through city after city, the stories of ordinary citizens were more powerful than any advertisement. Videos of families, farmers, small business owners, and former coal miners talking about how they were thriving thanks to Musk's platform went viral. In some places, entire communities were transitioning to clean energy, creating jobs and opportunities that would never have existed in the past. In one town in Ohio, a former coal miner named Danny showed Musk around a new wind farm that had brought jobs to hundreds of people who had been laid off from traditional energy sectors. "This is my home, and this is the future. It's no longer just about surviving, it's about thriving," Danny said, his voice filled with pride. Musk was moved by these encounters, but he knew that he couldn't just bask in the success of the tour. His opposition, though rattled, was still formidable. The oil industry was not one to back down quietly. Their campaign against him had only grown more desperate. There were whispers of shadowy backroom deals, even rumors of attempts to discredit Musk personally. One afternoon, just as Musk was preparing for a major speech in Philadelphia, Abigail called him into a side room. Her face was grim as she held up a tablet displaying the headline of a major newspaper, "Elon Musk's Empire Under Investigation for Tax Evasion." The article detailed accusations that Musk's companies had allegedly used loopholes to avoid paying billions in taxes. The timing was no coincidence. The attacks had become personal, and it seemed as though the opposition had found a new angle, undermine Musk's credibility and portray him as a corporate villain. "They're going for the jugular," Abigail said, frustration heavy in her voice. "This is their last-ditch effort to destroy your credibility before the final vote. We have to respond quickly." Musk's gaze was steely, his expression unreadable. He knew these kinds of attacks all too well, and while they stung, he wasn't about to let them distract him from his mission. "We don't fight on their terms," Musk said with quiet confidence. "We take the fight straight to them. This isn't just about me. It's about the future of the planet. We're going to hit them with the truth. We expose the system they've built to protect their interests." Abigail nodded, understanding immediately. She pulled out her phone and began drafting a response. Musk took a deep breath, staring out of the window at the busy streets below. He wasn't just fighting for renewable energy anymore, he was fighting to change the way power worked in this country, to dismantle an outdated system that kept the rich and powerful in charge. The next day, Musk addressed the issue head-on. He held a live-streamed press conference in Philadelphia, where he had just spoken about the successes of his renewable energy initiatives. The timing was impeccable. His words resonated with millions of viewers, especially as the news of the tax investigation was still fresh in people's minds. He began his speech by acknowledging the accusations but quickly turned the conversation toward the real issue, the system that had allowed the wealthiest companies to evade taxes while ordinary Americans bore the brunt of the cost. He spoke passionately about the loopholes that existed in the tax code and how they allowed corporations to avoid paying their fair share, further inflaming income inequality. "Let me be clear," Musk said, his voice firm. "This isn't about me. It's about the system that allows massive corporations to avoid paying taxes while ordinary Americans, the workers who keep this country running, are the ones who pay the price. This isn't a problem I've created. It's a problem that's been around for decades, and it's time for it to change." He then turned the conversation back to his vision. "What I'm doing with my companies is simple. I'm building a future for all of us. A future where everyone, no matter their background, no matter where they come from, has access to clean energy, to better job opportunities, and to a healthier planet. The attacks against me are just a distraction. They're afraid of the change we're bringing, and they will stop at nothing to hold on to their power." Musk's words had a profound impact. The press conference was watched by millions, and it sparked a conversation across the country. People were no longer focused on his tax history. They were focused on his message, and his message had a far greater reach than any scandal could stifle. The support for Musk's platform grew even stronger. The backlash from the oil industry and their allies only fueled the fire, proving to the public that they were truly threatened by the changes Musk was advocating for. As the days ticked down to the final vote, the tide had officially turned. The final vote in Congress was scheduled for the following week. The day before the vote, Musk received a call from one of his top advisors, who had just finished meeting with several key politicians on Capitol Hill. "It's looking good, Elon," the advisor said, his voice calm but excited. "We've secured enough votes to pass it. The grassroots movement has made a huge difference. Congress is feeling the pressure." Musk couldn't suppress a smile. It was happening. His vision for a sustainable future was about to become a reality. But as always, he knew the fight wasn't over. The real work was only just beginning. The day of the final vote had arrived, and the air in Washington, D.C. was thick with tension. The energy in the Capitol was palpable as reporters swarmed the halls, their cameras clicking away, capturing every moment leading up to what was expected to be one of the most consequential votes in recent history. This vote wasn't just about Musk or his platform, it was about the future of the country and the planet. In the days leading up to the vote, the political drama had reached a fever pitch. Proponents of Musk's initiative were energized, motivated by the people's support, and the undeniable success of the nationwide tour. But the opposition was not ready to give up without a fight. The oil industry and powerful lobbying groups had spared no expense, spending millions on ads, negative press, and backdoor dealings, attempting to sway undecided senators and congressmen. Musk had seen it all before, the money, the manipulation, and the hidden agendas. But he wasn't deterred. He knew that the battle for the future was about to be won or lost in these chambers. Musk sat in his private office, looking out over the city from the windows of his penthouse suite. Abigail, ever the strategist, was pacing back and forth, reviewing the final details for the day. "We have the votes," she said, without taking her eyes off the documents she was studying. "But we can't let our guard down. The opposition will do everything they can to derail this." Musk nodded but remained silent, his mind wandering for a moment. The journey had been long, longer than he ever anticipated when he first launched his platform. He thought about the roadblocks, the betrayals, the endless hours spent negotiating with politicians, the public debates, the personal attacks. Through it all, he had kept his eyes on the bigger picture, the promise of a sustainable future. But the magnitude of the moment hit him now, more than ever. This vote would define not just his legacy, but the future of generations to come. The stakes were higher than ever. "Let's get this done," Musk said with a steely resolve, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. The Capitol building was buzzing with activity as senators, congressmen, and their teams filed into the chambers. There was an air of anticipation, mixed with a touch of uncertainty. The final vote on Musk's platform would take place in the Senate, and all eyes were on the elected officials. Would they stand with the future, or would they cave to the pressure from corporate interests? Musk and Abigail made their way to the Capitol, accompanied by a team of trusted advisors. The closer they got to the building, the more intense the atmosphere became. The crowds outside were a mix of excited supporters and angry protesters. The streets were filled with signs, some calling for change, others decrying Musk as a corporate villain. As they entered the building, Musk was greeted by a group of his allies in Congress, leaders who had supported him from the beginning. Senator Harris, a longtime advocate for clean energy, was there, her expression a mixture of determination and cautious optimism. "Are you ready?" she asked, her eyes scanning the hallway as they walked. Musk took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Inside the Senate chamber, the mood was tense. The senators took their seats, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. A few final speeches were made, some in favor of the platform, others fiercely against it. But Musk knew that all the words in the world wouldn't change the reality of the situation, only the vote would. Senator Harris took the floor first, passionately defending the platform. "This vote isn't about the past," she began, her voice strong and unwavering. "It's about the future. It's about the next generation, who will inherit the world we leave behind. We can no longer ignore the environmental crisis that's threatening our planet. And we can't continue to stand by while powerful corporations destroy our future for their own gain. This is our chance to make things right." Her words resonated with the room, and a ripple of support spread through the chamber. But the opposition wasn't done yet. Senator Quinn, a powerful figure who had received significant backing from the fossil fuel industry, stood to rebut. "Ladies and gentlemen," Quinn began, his tone dripping with skepticism, "we've all heard the promises of a greener future. But what we're being asked to do today is nothing short of reckless. We're being asked to throw away jobs, throw away industries, and put the livelihoods of millions of Americans at risk for an untested idea. Musk's platform may sound good in theory, but the reality is, it's going to destroy lives. We can't afford to let this happen." The room was divided, but Musk remained resolute. He had known this moment was coming, and he wasn't about to let fear or manipulation decide the outcome. It was time to fight for the future. Finally, the moment arrived. The senators filed into the voting booths, one by one, their ballots ready to be cast. The chamber fell silent as the final votes were tallied. It seemed like an eternity, though it was only a few minutes. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Musk's heart pounded in his chest, each beat like a drum. The wait was agonizing. He turned to Abigail, who was standing beside him, her face unreadable. The screen at the front of the chamber flashed a result. Vote outcome, 52 to 48 in favor of the platform. The room erupted. Some senators stood and applauded, their hands clapping in triumph. Others, visibly defeated, shook their heads, knowing they had just witnessed the beginning of the end of an era. The press exploded into a frenzy, reporters rushing to get their cameras rolling as they flooded the chamber with questions. But for Musk, it wasn't about the headlines. It wasn't about the applause or the cheers. It was about something far more important, the moment the world had been waiting for. The transition had begun. And there was no turning back. Later that evening, as the press conference was broadcasted live to millions of viewers, Musk spoke directly into the cameras, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "This victory isn't just mine," he said. "It belongs to all of you, every person who believed in the future, every person who stood up for what's right. This is just the beginning. Together, we've taken the first step toward a world that's sustainable, fair, and just for everyone. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for your support. And thank you for believing that the future is worth fighting for." As he finished speaking, Musk turned to Abigail, a quiet smile crossing his face. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they had won this battle. And with this win, they had opened the door to a future where anything was possible. The weeks following the vote were a whirlwind. Musk's platform was officially sanctioned, and the work to implement the necessary changes began immediately. Across the country, the ripple effects of the decision were being felt. Renewable energy companies saw an unprecedented surge in investment, and public enthusiasm for clean energy reached an all-time high. The opposition, still reeling from the defeat, had to concede that the momentum Musk had built could not be easily reversed. But as the world cheered, Musk remained focused on the task ahead. The victory in Congress was only the first step in what would be a multi-decade mission to transform the global energy landscape. The real work was just beginning. Musk was sitting in his office late one evening, staring out over the horizon. The city below was alive with activity, but Musk felt a quiet sense of satisfaction in knowing that, for now, his part in this battle was over. Or so he thought. Abigail entered the room, holding a tablet. "You've been getting a lot of calls from overseas," she said, her voice calm but serious. "The world's watching. And now they're looking to you for leadership on a global scale." Musk turned his chair to face her. "What do you mean?" "There are countries, many of them, who want to adopt your platform. They're starting to implement renewable energy policies, looking to use your technology to phase out fossil fuels. They want your guidance, Elon." Musk rubbed his eyes. He had known that his platform would have global repercussions, but the extent of the interest was something he hadn't fully anticipated. It was clear now that the world had turned a corner, and the momentum for change was not just a national movement, it was a global one. "I wasn't planning for this," Musk said thoughtfully. "But it seems like we don't have much of a choice, do we?" Abigail smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "This is exactly what you wanted. You said you wanted to change the world. Well, now the world is asking for your help." Musk stood and walked over to the window. He gazed out at the city below, his mind racing with the possibilities. This was more than just business. This was about creating a future where humanity would have a chance to thrive in harmony with the planet. The next few months were spent in a flurry of meetings, both domestic and international. Musk found himself traveling more than he had in years. From Europe to Asia, governments and businesses were eager to implement his vision, but they needed guidance, solutions to the practical challenges they faced in transitioning from fossil fuels to clean energy. Musk's team was stretched thin as they worked around the clock to provide the necessary support. The pressure was immense, but Musk thrived under it. This was the opportunity he had worked for his entire life. In one particularly tense meeting in Tokyo, Musk sat across from government officials who were grappling with how to integrate large-scale solar infrastructure into the country's existing grid. Japan, an island nation with limited land space, faced unique challenges, but Musk saw the potential. He outlined a plan to integrate solar rooftops, harnessing the unused spaces atop buildings in urban areas, and then connecting them to a decentralized energy network that could be shared across the country. The Japanese officials were skeptical at first, but after hours of intense discussion and a few whiteboard sketches, they saw the feasibility of the idea. The meeting ended with a handshake, a promise to take the next steps toward collaboration. Back in the United States, progress on Musk's platform continued at a rapid pace. Renewable energy projects were springing up across the nation, from solar farms in the deserts of Nevada to wind turbines off the coast of Maine. But even as the energy landscape was changing, there were challenges at home. The fossil fuel industry, although bruised, was far from defeated. They had invested too much into the existing infrastructure to simply bow out. A number of powerful lobbying groups continued to fight back, trying to delay the transition with new regulations and media campaigns. They were attempting to hold on to the status quo, but the tide was turning too quickly. Musk knew that the fight wasn't over yet. As the days passed, he saw how easily vested interests could stir division and dissent. The real challenge was ensuring that this transition remained inclusive, ensuring that the communities who had relied on fossil fuels for their livelihoods would not be left behind. This wasn't just about technology, it was about people. A summit was organized in Washington, D.C., where Musk invited leaders from all walks of life, government officials, business leaders, environmentalists, and representatives from labor unions. The goal was to forge a path that would ensure no one was left behind during the energy transition. Musk delivered a powerful speech. "This is the moment we've been waiting for," Musk began, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "It's not just about saving the planet, it's about making sure we create a future that works for everyone. We can't just leave people behind. We must bring everyone to the table, ensure that workers in the fossil fuel industries are retrained, and that new, green jobs are available for everyone. This must be a transition, not a sacrifice." The room was silent, and then a murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. It was a tough conversation, but it was necessary. And it was clear to everyone in that room that Musk wasn't just talking about energy, he was talking about a societal shift. A shift toward cooperation, fairness, and sustainability. As the years went on, Musk's influence continued to grow, but so did the challenges. He wasn't just a businessman anymore, he was an icon, a symbol of hope for some and a target for others. But he had come to understand that with true change came opposition. And with that opposition came opportunity. He often thought back to the moment he stood in front of Congress, the moment when the votes had come in, and the weight of the decision had truly hit him. It wasn't just about winning the battle, it was about continuing the fight. Change was a constant, and it required relentless effort. But Musk was in it for the long haul. The world had changed. The transition had begun. And as long as there was work to do, Musk would keep pushing forward, one step at a time. The future had arrived, and it was far brighter than anyone could have imagined. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The journey doesn't end here, this is just the beginning. What do you think is the next big challenge we need to tackle? The future is yours to help shape.